Hello, welcome to University Television's Hotspot, where we discuss important issues that affect students here at Boise State University. I'm Jamie Bingham. At his State of the State address, Governor Otter proposed a guaranteed lock on tuition for Idaho college freshmen for a total of 4 years. Today I have with me 3 students who have different opinions on this issue and are here to discuss it. Welcome everyone, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
Let's begin by having each of you introduce yourself and your view on this topic.
Thanks, Jamie. My name is Josh Scholler, and I am a junior here at Boise State studying political science, and I'm actually just really glad that we are here to discuss such an important issue like higher education and how we can get around to really providing and creating opportunity for every student in Idaho and every family that really wants to have that chance.
Great.
I'm Peter Huguenin. I'm a sophomore here at Boise State University. I'm a communications major, and I also believe it's really good that we're finally having this discussion, and I think it's just important for us to try to make college affordable for everyone in Idaho possible.
And because this issue is important in all Idaho schools, we have a guest from Lewis Clark State College. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jamie. My name's Luke Kilcup. I'm a senior at Lewis Clark State College, majoring in economics, minoring in English. And I'm very supportive of the governor's proposal. I think that finding a way to make college more affordable for more Idahoans and out-of-state students is crucial to our success.
Great. So just to begin, according to Governor Otter, a tuition lock would provide, quote, an incentive for timely completion of a degree or professional certification program, unquote. So do you think this is accurate? Do you think that this cap will help incentivize people to finish their degree in 4 years?
Yeah, I think we're just glad, that the governor's actually getting back around to fulfilling his, the pre-recession, promises that he made, or the recession promises that he made, and we're really talking about education again and how do we go about funding that. And so I think, yeah, on a certain level, you're going to have, if this plan were to go through, you would have there'd definitely be an incentive for students and families because they know what they'll be paying. So there'll definitely be an incentive to finish in 4 years. But I think overall, when you step back and you take a look at this proposal, is it really a solution? Tuition costs have gone up every single year for the last, however many years, and at least that I've been going to college. And so it's really, is it more, as I'm sure we'll get into, is it a Band-Aid? Is it a real solution? What is it?
Well, and if you don't mind, I'll go next here. I agree with you. I'd like to see a few more specifics when it comes to this bill. I think if it's a 4-year lock where after 4 years your tuition can increase, then yes, I would be a little bit more motivated if I had to finish in 4 years. But if not, and it's going to be the same lower price every single year, what's the motivation to finish?
Yeah, I mean, part of the bill, I believe, is after 4 years, it can slightly increase. So if you think about it, there should be incentive. I don't know how much there will actually be because, a lot of people are here on their mom or dad's money, and there's not going to be much incentive then. But if they're paying out of their own pocket, they should have incentive.
Great. So do you think that this is going to be a income decrease for Boise State University if this does go through and tuition stays the same for freshmen coming in for 4 years? Yeah,
so I think what you have to look at is if with this tuition lock were to go through, you could definitely see some decrease in revenue, which in turn would then make the Boise State University make some, and really all colleges actually, make some really hard choices about, so if we're losing this revenue, so it's a great idea, right? How do we make tuition as affordable as possible for students? But were this to go through, you'd have, how do we, as a university, let's say at Lewis and Clark or at Boise State, how do we make up for that revenue shortfall? Do we raise out-of-state tuition? Do we cut programs? Do we fire teachers? What do we do to make up for that revenue shortfall? Because, there's already been talk in the legislature that they're not going to fund this thing. Even if it were to go through, they're not going to fully fund it. So how do we make up that revenue shortfall is a real question.
Yeah, and I think you kind of have to look 5-10 years down the road where if this does pass the legislature and it does get funded, then we're making Boise State, Lewis Clark State, C of I, well I guess not C of I, but all these schools more attractive to out-of-state students, to in-state students. If I know it's only going to cost $3,000 a semester for 4 years, I know I can go to school. But if I get 2 years in and it raises, tuition rises $900, then might not be able to attend. So I think you're going to have more students attending, and therefore it will make up eventually what we're going to lose with the lock.
Well, another part of it was also, to some extent, I mean, I don't know how much, but the legislature did say they would go and backfill any lost revenue. And also, this isn't necessarily going to make college drastically cheaper. They're going to try to guess how much it's going to cost in the 4 years and average it. So they shouldn't lose anything if they average there and do their math right.
So I think it's important to remember, that the funding has to be there, or else this tuition, this proposal won't work. Mm-hmm. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, if we're going to fund this, and we're going to say we're serious about funding education at all levels, do we prioritize education funding and tax cuts, or where's that line? So if we want to push tax cuts, or whatever that may be, how do we do that and fund education and fund this proposal were this to go through?
Do you mind if I jump in one more time? Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think you look at the governor's proposal, kind of looking at it through a narrow lens, and say that he is focused on education, mm-hmm. not necessarily tax cuts, but funding education, K through career is what I believe they're going for. And the legislature, it's not. The governor said that he doesn't. It's not his bill. The legislature can do what they want with it, and as long as it's acceptable, he'll still support it. So I think that education funding is a priority for the governor, especially through the rest of his term.
If I can add to that, I mean, there's jobs in the community that aren't being filled because there's people, we need the education. So we're definitely making this a priority, and I believe the money's there. It's a matter between the school to decide what they want to prioritize. Do they want to prioritize different programs that we already have, or do they want to prioritize the education? And it's going to be their responsibility to figure out what they want to prioritize, and if they want to go spend money somewhere else, they're going to do that. But if they're serious about education, this bill is going to help that.
Well, and it was, it was interesting. I think it was the Albertsons Foundation, I'm not really sure, but there was an interview that Governor Otter did, and he said, you tell me it's, whether it's the chicken or the egg, do we cut taxes and increase education funding, or the other way around, to bring jobs here? And he said, well, quite frankly, the businesses don't want to come here if there's not a skilled workforce. And there was a statistic that was just, released that said 68%, within 2 years, 68% of all jobs in Idaho are going to require at least certification or some sort of higher degree. And so if this tuition proposal were to go through and you do see revenue shortfalls, I'm not sure we would be able to see colleges meet that demand of that 68%.
Any response?
I'm just going to kind of stick with my original point that yes, if there is a shortfall and the legislature doesn't fund it, or mm-hmm. Fill whatever backslide they have, then yes, I think you will see the quality of education, or the ability to educate a freshman for 4 years, maybe deteriorate a little bit. But I think you're going to have more students, and if you do average it, like Peter had said, over 4 years, and Boise State doesn't, they can average those 4 years together and give you your tuition rate, and they know it's not going to underfund the university, then I don't think we'll have an issue, because you're going to attract more students from out of state. You're going to attract more Idaho students because it's going to be affordable.
Talking about jobs, I saw a figure recently that there's 33,000 unemployed people and 27,000 open jobs that people don't meet the qualifications for because of education. These are the jobs that hopefully we can be filling when people are going to be going to college, and if people know the tuition's going to stay the same for 4 years, they can budget out. Affordability isn't just about cost, it's about being able to plan. And this is going to help people plan for the future. And if they can plan for their future, they can hopefully make the future a brighter place, not just for them, but it's going to help the community as a whole.
Just one closing thing, to just remember that, while this is it's a good proposal, and ultimately I think all of us up here are glad that we're talking about funding education, I think it's important to remember that this proposal is really probably, you could argue that it's kind of a Band-Aid solution to the overall problem of rising tuition costs every year. And if you put a tuition lock on, then how do you, maybe that freshman that comes in next year pays $100 more, or that out-of-state student. So implicitly what the governor is saying with this proposal is, again, while it's a good gesture, is saying that tuition costs are going to continue to rise regardless. So I think it's important to remember that.
So BSU is growing, like as a university, we're getting more and more out-of-state students to come here. So do you think that this will incentivize people to become Idaho residents because of this tuition lock they might be able to receive?
Yeah, I think it's all about retention, right? I think it's about how many students can you bring here and how many can you get to stay. And again, that all revolves around, it's so many factors. Can the legislature fund it? Can we sustain this at a high level for X amount of years? And as far as I know, it's only 4 in-state students, as far as I know. So, again, so it's all about how do you maximize, or how do you make up for that shortfall of revenue that you could most likely see? And I would imagine that a lot of it, if I had to take a guess, I would say a lot of it would go to out-of-state students. So I would hate to see this proposal that means well actually decrease the retention rate that we have, because they would be, out-of-state students would see, even if they were here for a year, let's say they become an Idaho resident after freshman year, they don't get that tuition lock. And their tuition is going to go up more and more and more. And that's really not a good way to retain people to stay in Idaho and go to our schools.
Well, as an out-of-state student myself, it's definitely kind of something that I want to keep my eye on. But I don't think it's necessarily the biggest issue. People that are coming out of state are already paying more anyways, and we're coming, the Boise State specifically, because we want to be here. It's not necessarily because it's like the best school or anything, but it's a place that we feel connected to, and it's a home to us. Mm-hmm. So you can't put a price on where your home is.
Well, and I'd just like to say I think Boise State's a great school, even though I don't attend here. But I actually have a little bit of a personal story with this. I'm from Seattle, Washington, or at least the surrounding area. And came over to North Idaho College up in Coeur d'Alene, and immediately started going through the process, spent my year there, and then became a resident, so I could have that in-state tuition. I could vote here in Idaho, all that fun stuff. But I think that, like we're talking about, this is an amazing plan. It's a great step. We're starting the conversation, but we need to address those students that come in and their first year, maybe they're paying out-of-state tuition. Second year, what are we going to do? Are they going to move into that program? Are they going to have the lock that freshmen the year before had? I just think we need to, address that, and I'm sure the governor's office will as time goes on. Yeah,
I think probably the biggest problem that you're going to see with this proposal going forward is it's limited to such a small amount of students, and it's just in-state Idaho students. It's not deferred action students that live here. It's not out-of-state students. It's not any number of students that could potentially become in-state students. It doesn't apply to them. So how do we figure out a system where it opens it up to more, so students can have more opportunity to have a more affordable college experience?
Yeah, and you would agree this is the right step in the right direction. Maybe we just need to expand upon this.
Certainly, okay. I think. I don't think anyone's up here is going to say it's a bad thing that we're talking about education funding, right? But at the same time, it's what's a more measured and more common sense approach to create the opportunity for people.
If I could add to that also, it applies to in-state students because you have to help yourself before you help everyone else. And right now, Idaho's 50th in education still, last time I checked, and we want to help Idaho students first because they're going to be the ones that are going to get jobs in Idaho. Out-of-state students a lot of times are going to go back out of state, and they got their education here. They didn't even pay income taxes when they were working here, and then they're just going to leave. We want people that are going to be working in Idaho to be helping the community here.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem like, I'm not concerned about Idaho students or whatever, because obviously we are, and I am, but I think it's important that, we worry about not only Idaho students, but worry about all students that want to come to Idaho colleges. And how do we make it affordable for all of those students? And that's really the primary concern for me is if we pass this tuition lock, who gets the costs offset if the legislature decides not to fund it? In fact, we were sitting in ASBSU 2 weeks ago or last week, and one of the presenters that came and talked about the tuition lock was like, well, we got a legislative update, and the funding for the tuition lock is already in jeopardy. So if this proposal goes forward, but the funding doesn't, who gets the short end of the stick? Because someone's going to get the short end of the stick, and it's not going to be in-state students. So I imagine, it could definitely fall on out-of-state students.
we're never even going to have that problem if it doesn't get funded through the legislature, which, as we all know, the Idaho legislature is very conservative. I'm proud of that fact, but you know, there's always a good debate when it comes to funding of any sort. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, so I was actually researching a little bit about this, and Illinois has a same kind of tuition lock as well. There's one distinct difference, though. They don't backfill the college's lost revenue, which is what Otter is proposing. So do you see that being something that maybe it won't go through because of his proposal to help the college if there is lost revenue?
Yeah, I think, you're seeing it right now in the legislature, right, with the healthcare proposal that Otter's put forward. It's essentially dead because they didn't pass the funding for it. I mean, it could come back, last I heard, but if the funding's not there, you're probably not going to see it. And again, you know, as Luke touched on, the legislature's very conservative. I think they've already had 2 or so, maybe, tax cuts bills go through, and so that's a very high priority for them. And so how do we, you know, it's very possible that this funding could not go through, and if that doesn't happen, you're probably not going to see the tuition lock go through either.
Yeah, and I think the backfill is one of the biggest, not problems, because I don't think it's, you know, a terrible thing for the legislature to consider, but it's just hard working in the legislature, as Josh and I both know. Raising taxes and or giving money to a public university is not frowned upon, but it's something that's there's always a hearty debate between moderate Republicans, some people a little further right, and then Democrats as well. So it'll be interesting, like I said, to see what happens. We can only sit back and watch at this point unless you're involved in student government. So,
I mean, it's a matter of what do you want to prioritize? Do you want to prioritize education? Do you want to prioritize some other program? The government and the legislature is going to have to decide what they want to make important. I mean, I'm as conservative economically as you can get, and at some point you have to be like, how far are we going to let this slip before we fix this problem? And I believe the money's there. They just have to finally decide to make it a priority.
Well, and I think it's interesting that Luke talked about, you know, and both of you talked about priorities and investments. And the Idaho Statesman just released, I think a couple days ago, a statistic that was, or a study that was done that showed for every dollar invested in public and higher education, I mean, there was a multitude of, you know, really good reasons to do it, but in particular, it was for every dollar invested, it's $2 and some odd cents that you get back as a state in, you know, for not having to, for welfare programs, increased revenue that you get when you have a degree, you know, so by every stretch of the word, higher education is an investment that you get your return from, double, you know, so it's really not a, I've never understood why many in our legislature view it as a burden to invest in education, even when you repeatedly have studies that show how much of an investment, how much it actually pays off in the future.
Yeah, and you know, I can't really speak to the legislature, but when it comes to Governor Otter, and since it is his tuition lock proposal, we look at the rest of his state of the state and talking about tuition or education funding and getting the conversation started. I think the numbers were, 8.8% increase for four-year schools and 9.6 or right around 10 for two-year colleges. So we are making that investment. And now if we can just keep those students here in Idaho and say, hey, we're going to, instead of your tuition going up $1,100 over 4 years for every semester, we're going to give you a chance to save a little bit of money and get a good degree and, you know, move out to Twin Falls, work for Chobani, stay here, work for Micron. I mean, really, we have some amazing companies here. We just need to give people the tools to use.
And about that, we see the companies around care about Boise State. Micron donates a lot of money to Boise State, and they've helped us a lot. And it showed that they care about the people coming up because they realize that they're making an investment in the students, and they're hoping to get something out of that. Hopefully, employees and people that are going to be helping the community and putting more money in. And I believe that this is a good way to do this is by it just emphasizes the education. By doing that, like you said, it returns. It's an investment. Everyone benefits, and we'll just see what the government decides to do with it.
It was interesting that you mentioned Micron. I think it was a year or two ago, they talked about how, and my dad actually works for Micron too for 20 some odd, I think almost 30 years, and he was telling me, we would love to hire people from Boise State. We'd love to hire locally, but the matter of fact is we can't. We import most of our workforce because Boise State's just not, most of the, I think after 4 years, half of Boise State or Idaho graduates are gone out of the state. Just because, and so they can't hire in Idaho. And it would be great if they could, but we just aren't turning, because our universities don't have the resources to turn out the grads that they need.
There we are. We don't want to cut funding then, do we? Luckily, Micron made a donation, very generous donation. I forget
Yeah,
the
like
total.
$25 million.
25 million,
Yes,
yeah. I wish I had
awesome.
that to donate to
Yeah, no kidding.
Boise State.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I see that all of you are obviously for this, but there's been a lot of argument for people that are against it. And I read a couple articles of people saying, well, this is not going to affect me. I'm already in college. I have no use for this. So how do you feel like people should kind of change their perspective and maybe see what's coming in the future, not so much what's happening to them at the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I plan on keeping my family in Idaho, and so when my children go to school at Boise State, U of I, or wherever it is, I don't know if I can I say U of I here in Boise State?
It's allowed.
It's allowed, okay.
It's okay for this time, yeah.
Or even Lewis Clark State College. I don't, hopefully I'm able to pay for their college, or at least, get them on the right track, and if it's, their tuition's increasing every year, that's not gonna look good, but at the same time, for us, and if we're trying to start the conversation with sophomores, juniors, seniors, why would they be excited about it if their tuition is going to keep rising? We need to figure out a way, and I think that the governor's staff and office is hard at work on this or to work them into the program over time and say, hey, your tuition will lock at this rate once you're an in-state student. And that motivates people to become residents as well, in my mind.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that there's no reason to be against it because you're out of college. It's not hurting you at all unless you're that worried that someone's going to come through and take your job, which is at that point just a ridiculous reason to be against it. But I mean, it's not, there's nothing in it about a tax increase. It's no cost to you. It's literally just helping the students, and by helping the students, like we've said 100 times already, it helps everyone. Being against it because you're out of college is not a good reason to be against it.
Yeah, I think it all goes back to being an investment, and who doesn't like to save and earn money, right? And that's what you do with investing in higher ed. It's been that's what you do, and I think for me personally, it's a little bit more personal because I grew up here, right? So I love the idea of an educated society and an educated community, and it's the old saying, an educated community is the best kind of community. And so I want, and really for this situation, an educated state is a better state. And so I really think that's kind of what you want with that. But that's the goal.
I would agree.
Great, so we have to wrap up. Is there any last minute comments you guys would like to point out?
I guess to echo kind of what I said earlier, we're really glad that Governor Otter and some of the legislature is really getting around to talk about how we fund education, not only at the higher level, but K through 12 and pre-K as well. But that's obviously a different discussion. But in this tuition lock rate, it's a good idea. I mean, it is a good start to a conversation on how do we make college more affordable and how do we create opportunity for people. But in the end, also, I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I think there's a lot of difficulties with this proposal, and it's really, to me, it's just a Band-Aid solution to the actual problem.
And I would say that I think this is a step in the right direction, and I believe that we have to start making education a priority. It's not a question anymore. We're last in the country in education, and we have to start emphasizing our students, helping them out, just doing what's best for Idaho.
Well, and it is education funding that we're 49th or 50th or whatever it is, but we're still performing, middle of the pack, but let's move that up. I agree. The only thing I really have to say to wrap it up is, first of all, thank you for having us here.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Absolutely.
It's exciting to me to have, a college Democrat, college Republican, and I guess you could call me a college Republican as well, sitting up here and talking about education funding. It's pretty encouraging for our state. You look at the legislature, and some people won't talk to each other there, and we're going to be there in a couple of years, hopefully. So we'll keep the conversation going. Yes, sir.
Who says that Republicans and Democrats can't get along? Look at this.
There you
This is
go.
wonderful.
This might be 1 in a million.
Well, thanks again for joining me, guys. I'm Jamie Bingham, and from everyone here at University Television, thank you for watching.